So welcome back. My first guest is Dr. Marc Baiocco, the new superintendent of Clarkstown School District. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I know we had the opportunity to go out for lunch, recently, and I was delighted that you said yes to come on our program. So I've learned a good bit about you from our lunch meeting, and great reports so far on your initial time here in Clarkstown, just a couple of months so far. But delighted to have you on the program, and I really want to give the opportunity for our residents to learn a little bit about you, because you really are leading the biggest school district in our town, and one of the biggest districts in the county. And so great to have you here. Maybe we could just segue right into it. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into education.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the warm welcome. It was really incredible, and that has been throughout the Clarkstown community. I owe a tremendous thank you to the Board of Education, too, for the trust that they put in me to lead the district and move the district forward. In regards to what got me into education, it became one of those passions for me, and I will say that it developed over time. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily innate that I was looking to go into education. But over the course of time, I started to realize that helping students each and every day to succeed and giving them those life skills, oftentimes those soft skills, the executive functioning skills, to be successful was something that was really interesting to me. And I started to pursue that, and I was inspired, quite frankly, by one of my history teachers. So I started studying history. I had the intentions of becoming an attorney, and truly enjoyed the history perspective, and more importantly, enjoyed the education perspective.
Mm-hmm. And I know we had talked a little bit off camera and before, your family background too, like you come from a family that's steeped in
Yep.
law enforcement and education as well, correct?
Yeah. So my mother was an educator. She became an educator as I was moving through high school, actually. So I watched her go through that process and kind of got an understanding of what it entailed. And I think it was monumental for me because it was one of those things where I was old enough to understand exactly what she was doing in terms of the commitment and the passion and the process even. My father was in law enforcement. He was a police officer in Yonkers at the time. So I had a very strong foundation in terms of the support that I needed to go through that type of program. And I would say that they were influential in that as well.
And we're all blessed, obviously, when you have a strong influence like that with your parents that could really kind of show you the way. So you really had two options, that they kind of presented to you as, from their life's arc, right? Mm-hmm. Law enforcement and education. So what was the tipping factor for you, to kind of eventually get into education?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I found interest in both. So I obviously enjoyed law. As I was saying, I was in a pre-law program and looking to hopefully go and become an attorney one day. And so that aspect of it really interested me. The other part of it was I started to find this interest in education as well. I think the tipping point for me was that I was working in the schools and I had the opportunity to actually go into law enforcement. I was taking tests at the time through NYPD, through Yonkers, the county consortium tests, and I decided that I really enjoyed education, so I was going to put this off for the time being and see where it brought me. And here I am today.
which is great. I mean, you've had a very distinguished career in education, but tell me about your experience in the classroom. So how long were you teaching, and you were the subjects that you were really kind of offering as well?
Mm-hmm. So I started in the classroom as a social studies teacher. I worked in social studies, teaching global history, U.S. history. I taught at the AP level, the advanced placement level. And then I segued into Gorton High School in Yonkers at the time, had a magnet program for law. So this became the best of both worlds for me. I had an opportunity to do both passions. Mm-hmm. And I taught everything from trial advocacy to trial tactics to civil law, criminal law, and I was actually able to be involved in a youth court program there as well. So we developed a youth court program, and that was in concert with the Yonkers Police Department as well as the family court. And we built a pretty robust program where students were adjudicating cases, collecting restitution on some cases. And it was a real learning experience, both for me and for the students who went through the program, whether they went through as a respondent or, as I said, they were actually adjudicating the case. Everybody learned from the experience, and it was a great second chance for kids.
We'll have to get you to come speak to our youth court, because we have a lot of Clarkstown students that actually participate. Our youth court's been in effect here for 20 plus years, well over almost 30 years, and really a model program for the area. And a lot of Clarkstown students, so, we'll have to reach out and get you to come speak to that.
I would love to. That'd be great.
So you moved from the classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually into more in administration. Tell us what that was like for you.
Yeah, I had the good fortune of doing a full-time internship. So I actually did a yearly internship at the assistant principal level, which was great for me. It was a great transition. Again, I started to find a new passion now, and I realized that as I worked my way into administration, I had more of a profound impact on a greater group of students than I did just in the classroom. And the classroom was very rewarding, but I found that as I started getting into the administrative ranks, it was more about shifting programs. It wasn't just about what you taught in terms of content. I then moved on to the assistant principal role and served as an assistant principal for 5 years. And then I had the opportunity to become a principal at a junior-senior high school. So I worked for 8 years as a principal, and then moved on to the superintendency. So my last 13 years, both at the principal level and superintendency, have been in the Elmsford district.
Right. And just for those that, Elmsford is a very similar community to Clarkstown and Elmsford, the Greenberg area. Mm-hmm. Actually, from the census standpoint, Greenberg and the statistics are remarkably similar between Clarkstown and us. In fact, we're often compared, by the state, to that area. So it's a very similar community. Elmsford's probably a little more diverse,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, than Clarkstown, although there's a lot more diversity happening here in Clarkstown over the last 10 years. But how big is the Elmsford district? And in terms of that, you also had the opportunity to take on some leadership roles amongst superintendents within the section, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I became superintendent, Elmsford was an interesting experience for me because it was a small district that allowed me to have my hands, so to speak, in the experience part of it in many different things. So there's very little in terms of support at the district level. So the superintendent would take on a lot of the roles. So I learned almost every facet of operating a school district, from the financial components to the technological components to buildings and maintenance and facilities. So that was really rewarding for me. It was an interesting experience, and as I started to grow in the superintendency, I started to find myself now as a veteran superintendent, which I didn't necessarily consider myself much anymore. But as I started to transition to that level, I then found myself looking at some of our advocacy agencies. We have a CSA, our local CSA in Southern Westchester. I sat on the executive board there for several years, both as treasurer and vice president. And then I moved on to the Lower Hudson Council of Superintendents, which represents Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess. And I find myself really enjoying being at the executive board level because we have so much advocacy. Mm-hmm. Public education is oftentimes somewhat in peril, if you will, particularly when it comes to budgetary matters. So it's always about advocating for the kids that we serve and making sure that we're getting what's deserved for public education, because this is the hallmark of democracy, right? Mm-hmm. This is the foundation of democracy, is a public education system. So we want to make sure that we continue to preserve that and that we continue to fight for the funding that's necessary to run great schools. Yeah,
and so that's really served you well. Now, you started here July 1st, right?
Yep.
So you're only here, less than 2 months, by the time this airs, but you've already hit the ground running, and just great reports back from so many folks, and real energy and I think a vision. How has the transition been for you? And then, what are some of the things that you're looking to tackle right away?
So the transition has been great. The community has been so welcoming, and I'm so appreciative of that. It made the transition from one office to the other pretty seamless. But what made it seamless was really the relationship building. Already I've had parents reaching out to me and community members reaching out to me, and being able to forge that partnership and relationship early on is going to lead to so much success, not only for me, but for the school district. As we move forward, we have a series of goals. Curriculum, of course, is always our goal. That's our business. So that's the obvious. Making sure that we're building on the amazing things that are already happening in the Clarkstown district, quite frankly, and just expanding them. Our goal is to make students future ready. And we don't know what that future looks like just yet. So it's really important for us to try our best to provide them with the skills for the things that are going into the unknown, so to speak. So that's one of our first and foremost. The second is we know that we have gone through a global pandemic. There have certainly been issues associated with that along the social emotional aspect of things. So it's providing that social emotional support, not only for our students, that's very important, but for everybody collectively as a community, our parents, our staff members, and making sure that we're cognizant of that and we're not doing things in a performative way, that we're actually out there and making sure that we have practical and logical approach to the way we're helping with the social emotional components. Our facilities need some upgrading. We want to make sure that we have a 5-year plan in place for our facilities and addressing some of the issues that we're encountering there. And then last but not least, which is very important depending on the time in the news media, but for our perspective, it's always important. And that is securing our schools and making sure that we have a safe and secure environment with our relationship with you and the police department. But then in addition to which, a safe and secure environment from the social emotional aspect, that it's welcoming, it's affirming for every kid.
That's an incredibly ambitious agenda, and but you're well able to the task. I mean, I've only met you a couple of times so far, but I'm incredibly impressed with your energy and your vision. And you go back and you look at a track record. I mean, you had an incredible track record in Elmsford, and also just with the leadership, amongst superintendents. You're a leader among leaders, and we know that that's going to continue here in Clarkstown. So we're blessed and fortunate to have you here as our new superintendent.
Thank you. The feelings are mutual.
Well, thank you so much. So we're about out of time, but I want to thank you for being a great guest, and I want to wish you well as you continue your mission here in Clarkstown.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.